So before I get started, I need to let you know that I'm making a video series and I'm going to put it in a playlist for future reference. You can come back to it and follow along with what I'm going to talk about in these next few videos. Some of the things that I will be covering in this video requires that you know some of the stuff beforehand, so it makes more sense for you. But without further ado, let's get into it. So for this video, we're going to cover planning a flight request. And to let you know ahead of time, this is my quote for the video. 80% of it is planning, doing paperwork, getting clearance and approval. 20% of it is actually flying. So let's get into it. There's a lot of complications and many hoops that you have to jump through to get footage like this. Don't just show up and try to fly without any kind of approval. You could get into big trouble. One thing to note is for the next video, I'll be covering how to submit a flight request. So some of the things that you see here in this video will be things that will be referred to in the future. But for now, I'll just briefly give you a glimpse of what to expect in the next video. Another thing I need to mention is this isn't easy, and this is a very long and difficult process. And speaking from experience, don't be like me, be better. I'll go through some examples of what not to do. This was also my first flight request, so I wasn't sure what to expect. So from here, it was just me trying to get familiar with the whole system and how this process works. If you plan on flying for an event on campus, it is considered business or commercial. So that means it's going to fall under the UAS regulation Part 107. That means it's not for a club or recreational. Another thing for me to point out is even if you're in a club or a student org, that doesn't qualify as quote unquote club activity or recreation. If you're providing drone footage for a student org or anything else like that, then it's considered commercial, Part 107, or business. The aircraft that I had planned to use was the DJI FPV. It was a big drone that topped out at 90 miles per hour, and being so new to FPV, that wouldn't have ended well. Looking back, I was very incompetent and I did not understand or realize the gravity of me asking or requesting for this kind of flight. What you should do, contact the event staff who should direct you to the coordinators or the managers and see if they are open to the idea and if it is even possible in the first place. Once they acknowledge you as the pilot and the person flying at the event, then we can move on to the next steps. And the next steps is to create an SOP that is based on the circumstances or the event. One thing I need to mention for my notes here is it is also your job as the pilot to make sure that you can address concerns, mitigate risks, and remedy them if possible based on the presented circumstances. Each scenario will vary, but I'll be going over the ones that I've encountered. Granted, some of these were done under ACE because I was the media intern. I'll be going over some of the hoops that you might encounter. Getting permission/approval from event leads like coordinators and event managers, equipment concerns, launch and landing concerns, and other unique variables depending on where you plan to fly on campus. So for my first event, it was with DJ Mandy, and it was hosted in West PC Ballroom. There were more concerns for this one because it was hosted indoors, and the concern was for lighting and sound equipment, which was approximately $70,000, and I had to address some logistics. So what we did, or what I did with University Centers, is we coordinated a map and a flight path that was based on their equipment. From there, it was just a matter of flying and respecting their boundaries. For Horizon, which was my latest event, it was outdoors, so it wasn't as strict as the West PC Ballroom one, but there are still some things that I ran into. So for example, it's the same thing with UCEN or University Centers. It was getting approval from the coordinator or manager, making sure that they were aware and acknowledge me as the pilot who is flying at their event. There were some strict limitations, so it was to only capture the first 3 songs unless stated otherwise, and there was no flying on stage during performances or near talent. So those were some of the restrictions that I needed to follow. And then for another event that I had, it was supposed to be for the Olympics. This event, I actually did not fly for it because initially I was informed that it was outdoors. But as it got closer to the event, turns out that the event was actually indoors at the Lion Tree Arena. So I ended up not flying for it. But the important thing here is that I communicated with the hosts or the coordinators of an Olympics. Another thing I should mention is plan things out earlier and contact the people earlier. For Olympics, I was actually cutting it pretty close to the edge, so I ended up not being able to fly for it. And for this next portion, we'll be going through the SOP, or Standard Operating Procedures. And for me, I based my standard operating procedures off of another official source, and it is going to be the UAS Standard Operating Procedures from the Division of Aviation from North Carolina. I use this as a basis for mine. You'll need to have this for your flight request. I'll link it down in the description below so you guys have a reference, and I'll also link my template that I've used just to make it easier for you guys. Another thing is, take it with a grain of salt. Feel free to change it. All right, so for the SOP, this is currently what I have, and feel free to follow along if you have the document. So it's actually pretty straightforward the way I said it, but we'll just go through it. So personnel is just me, the pilot. You'll be putting your name, and for me, I also like to put my certificate number so they have it. Visual observer is just whoever is with you watching your drone, or technically spotting you, if you will. For me, it was the ACE staff, and what they had was a radio. So whenever the drone was up in the air, they'd communicate with the team saying that the drone's up in the air. And if anything were to happen, they would also contact the team like, hey, by the way, drone's down. Thankfully, it's never happened. Knock on wood. So for me, I also like to include my equipment. I don't think you need to, but I just have it there so that the people from EH&S is aware. Next is concerns, hazards, and collisions. So this is based on like the event that you're doing. So for this one, it is at the amphitheater, and the amphitheater has a stage, it has the buildings adjacent to the stage, and there's lighting, sound, and stage equipment. There's performers, talent, students, and other staff members. So for emergency procedures, it is crucial for you to know what to do if something like this were to arise, or if something like this happens. So collisions is the last thing you want to do as a pilot, and is a big no-no. It's pretty straightforward. Have a first aid kit, make sure the student's okay, double check for injuries, make sure that everything's all right, provide first aid if needed, and then if you do collide with somebody, then definitely include that into your post report. For equipment, check for damages, and then if you have extra people that can serve as visual observers, have them ready in place to catch the drone or maybe even prevent a collision. For collisions, have set locations for your visual observers. Fly at least 5 feet above the crowds. Another thing I want to add on to this is make sure you give yourself a good margin for error. You don't want to be flying in a very risky way that could potentially injure somebody. LiPo fires. Make sure you keep your batteries inside a LiPo safe bag. For me, I like to bring a LiPo safe bag with a fire extinguisher, and then I like to have it just in case. Chances are low, but it's never zero. I'll probably also put up a video showcasing the danger of it. All right, so pre-flight operations. Some of these things should already be common knowledge, or this should be things that you're already doing as a pilot. Let's go through it. Inspection. Drone, frame, make sure you tighten anything loose. Camera, motors and screws. Don't want your motors to fall out. Propellers and screws. You do not want to have your propellers fly out during flight. ESC, body, battery, micro SD, goggles, check your goggles for its battery, signal strength, SD. Check your radio or remote controller for the battery level, and make sure your gimbals are set. And a couple of things that I should mention with the checklist and the inspection is make sure everything is working properly before you even fly. For the day of Horizon, I tested my backup SpeedyBee, and I found out my wiring was actually wrong. So here it is in my notes. For my camera unit, the O3, my RX and TX were swapped. So the side effect was the O3 wasn't taking in commands like recording during takeoff or turning off low power mode. Make sure you double check that everything is working properly and check your wiring. Another thing is to double check your failsafe settings. Make sure your failsafe is working properly. For Horizon, I set my failsafe to GPS rescue because it was outdoors. In another event that I had, I forgot to adjust my packet rates, so I was pushing my range to the limit. Another thing that I ran into, this is a bit more niche with the O3 and the O4 camera units. If you're arming and disarming within a split second, sometimes it won't record immediately, so I lost some footage. Thankfully, the footage was just test flight footage, but that's something to keep in mind if you are using the O3 and O4. All right, and then post-flight operations, it's pretty straightforward. If anything, you can just fill it in as it is. For the map and flight plan, I actually keep it pretty simple. I just use Google Maps and I take a screenshot, put it into Photoshop, and then just draw out whatever path I want or that I am intending to do. So I have the total flight I have the total flight paths, and then I have them shown individually. So this is path 1, this is path 2, and this is path 3. And they're all color coded. And another thing to keep in mind is your takeoff and landing position. Make sure you have it so that everybody else is aware that you are at that specific location. But for Horizon, I actually did not take off where I planned. I actually changed it during the day of because there was traffic where I thought I was going to start the flight. So instead, I actually moved back, and I'll probably put it up on the map for you guys to see. All right, so that's pretty much it for the planning phase. There's maybe a couple of things I might have missed, but if you have any questions, please leave a comment and feel free to let me know. I will try to address it, and please like and subscribe and stay tuned.